Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Roberts. I'm the resident dramaturg at the Indiana Repertory Theater. Thank you for joining us for this post show discussion with the cast of the book club play by Karen Zacharias that is live on stage at the IRT through October 30th and available for streaming through October 31st. Can I ask you all to introduce yourselves and just wave and say hi, and then we'll know who you are?
Hi, I'm Emily Berman. I play Jen in the book club play.
Hi, I'm Cassia Thompson. I play Lily.
I'm Andrea San Miguel. For some reason, it says Andrea were San Miguel's. I thought I'm still Andrea San Miguel. My pronouns are she, her, and I play Anna in the show.
I'm going to go next. I'm Sean Davis. I'm using Archibald Crumbleworth III's laptop, and I play Rob and Sam the Walmart pundit in the play.
Will.
And Will, and I play Will.
Will E. Frozen. There you go. Hi, I'm Adam Voss, and I play Alex.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to start out with what may seem like an obvious question. Are any of you book club members in real life? If not, just what is your relationship to books and reading?
I would say I'm not an official book club member, but there are certain books that my friends and I have like simultaneously read and then informally chatted about. A Little Life was one that we all just kind of read within, like, one person read it. It's like, you need to read this. And then within like a year, 10 of us had read it and could like cry about it together.
You know, you bring up a really good point, Rich. I'm not in a book club, nor have I been. But this group in particular would be a great book club group. So I'm just gonna like pause this right now. We should let's start a book club, y'all.
I'm in.
Our new book club? I think this is our new book club. No, I've never been.
I'll call it Anna's book club. And no, I'm kidding. Let's start a book club.
There's no way we could say no now. We just got put on the spot.
Well, you can decide later.
How most book clubs get started, I think.
Yeah. We started an IRT book club several years ago, and we had one meeting and read one book and had a great time. And then the second book we got to that day and everybody said, I haven't finished this yet. And we never met again.
Oh no, that book broke book club.
It broke
did.
book club.
That book broke book club. And I never finished it because I didn't like it. I won't say what it is to save the author embarrassment because I'm sure he'll see this chat. Anybody else have something to say about their relationship with books?
I was a book club of one as a kid. I was just sort of like, just the kid who was forever with a nose buried in a book. And I've never been in a part of an official book club, but I do think it's something that's in my future, especially after having done this play.
That was me too as a kid.
Yeah, same. Never been part of a book club, but always an avid reader. I usually say that words are my first love. They are. I've been reading things as long as I can remember. So I would love to be part of one. It just has not happened yet, except for now,
It just did.
As part of Honest by Force Book Club.
I love to hear words are my first love from an actor.
Oh, they are.
Have any of you read the books that are talked about in the play? And what I particularly want to know is if you have, are there places where you disagree with your character about the books?
I'm reading The Age of Innocence right now, and I have had a number of experiences that mirror not my character's experience, but another character's experience in the play. I don't know if I could give things away, but that book really is excruciatingly uncomfortable at times in like the romantic sort of like tension, passion, things aren't going exactly how you want them to go kind of way. And so it was very interesting to truly have that experience and be able to identify so closely with the, the experience in the play. I felt for Rob in a major way as I was reading that book. It actually made me really uncomfortable too. So
I've read
Cool.
the Da Vinci Code, and I absolutely disagree with Will. I find myself aligning with Rob more because I remember when it was super popular and I tried to read it. My dad had finished it and he's like, "Oh, it's good." And I got through like the first chapter or two and I was like, and I put it down and I went to go watch the movie instead. I was like, yeah, this is what it needs to be. I can't read this on the page. I need to watch the movie. I'm not, no.
Oh God, I see. This is where I completely differ from Anna. I love the Da Vinci Code. I love Twilight. Granted, I think I read both of them at an earlier age, but like I remember being like hooked, just and maybe it was because it is very cinematic to me, and I think I like to indulge a little bit in the imaginative kind of in these novels, and so I really loved them. And and I read Moby Dick like in college, and I was like, oh, this just really, this kind of trudges on, doesn't it? Like so I think I'm completely different from my character. I just like a good old, just a little speed read. That's what I'm about.
I think I'm like Rob in that I have seen the movies for all of these books, but I have not read any of them.
I think audiences are very sympathetic with Rob in that.
Yeah.
I read Moby Dick this summer, inspired by this play. Having tried to read it several times in my life, and I finally got through it this summer, I was very proud of myself. Like our sky diving friend and her pride at Ulysses, which I could never get through. This is one of those plays that moves from very serious moments to very comic moments, from realism to almost kind of farce very quickly. What did you do in rehearsal, and what are you doing now in performance that keeps the play funny yet grounded in emotional truth, which was something we talked about a lot before we even started casting, actually?
No, I mean, it's a great question, and it's something that I think we use the entire rehearsal process exploring, where all comedy is going to be that much more funny when it's rooted in truth. And so I think we all had to sit down with the text and kind of like spend the time peeling it back, understanding what's the relationship, what's the context, what's the subtext, what's really going on, who are these people, how do they feel about each other, what are the circumstances that brought them to this moment right here, in order to have permission to play the farce, to get to the point where we've earned that right. And it is interesting that even using the word farce, we had at one point a quote board in the rehearsal room where we would just throw up on the chalkboard different expressions or things that came up. And I believe it was Will at one point. Will and Emily were talking about that. I think we're maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the rehearsal where it was time to exercise that farce muscle, that we got to that point where we could do that. And so Emily wrote up on the chalkboard, exercise the farce muscle, or just farce muscle. And I think just by paying attention to the beats throughout, we found kind of organically or naturally where those moments arise, and then when they kind of come back, it's like a dance.
Well, what Karen has done really smartly in this play, and the way that like all great playwrights from all the way back to Shakespeare do, is that like she has given us this building tension and then release that allows us to build that tension between characters and in scene, and then the valve gets released on that, and that's where those big farce farcical moments come out of. So, you know, and we feel it on stage every night that the audience is on that journey with us, so that when those large farcical moments happen, they are right there with us. So it doesn't necessarily feel like it's, you know, larger than life or out of place. It's necessary to relieve some of the tension that we have and that Karen has built up in the play.
I also think it's fun to remember that, you know, a farce is a play where everything is kind of running at 100, at, you know, level 100 the whole time, and that's built for that, and that's structured for that. But it's something that I keep in mind as we're doing this, is that, you know, those moments in life that you feel like you couldn't script, that no one would believe, that are too silly or too ridiculous or too outsized. I think Karen's done a really good job of writing those moments into the play as well, so that it really feels kind of organic, in the way that in life you find yourself in these ridiculous situations sometimes, that you think no one would ever believe it if it were on stage. So she's written that as well.
Shout out to Karen.
There is a version of this play that could be like a sitcom, which would be funny, but I think the grounding in realism then just makes it that much funnier when things go totally wrong, as they do. On a similar topic, the play is a comedy, but it does deal with a lot of serious issues like race and sexuality. And sometimes the approach to those issues is serious, and sometimes it's comical. How did you navigate that process in rehearsal to come up with something that you felt would work well?
I think one of the core, you know, tenets that we took into the rehearsal process in order to build those moments is to, I'm thinking particularly of the stuff with Lily, and also particularly the stuff with Will coming out, is to not try and manifest anything and to let it happen as it would happen. And also to approach each situation with a lot of care and love for each other as actors, and also, you know, the love and appreciation that the characters would have for each other. So particularly with Will's, you know, scene, that coming out scene, which is this really interesting mix of something that is broad and comical, but then deeply personal and serious. And you know, we went into it with a sense of celebration and a lot of care for one another as actors in the space, and the care that the characters would have for each other. Because I think that is universally true of the people that are in that room in the play, is that they all care about each other. So if that's sort of a guiding light for you, you can navigate that, you know, the sort of brackish water between tone, right? Like, and easily shift from one into the other.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback off of that, I think it's also what you were talking about, care between us on the stage. Nothing is ever funny just for the sake of being funny. We only find things funny or compelling or sad in as much as we care about the situation or the people. So all of that time spent talking about the depth, the history, the social ramifications of moments like that are what earns us those laughs. And I think we've had conversations of knowing that just because people laugh doesn't mean that a moment is funny or that they find it funny. Sometimes people laugh and they don't know why they're laughing. Sometimes people laugh as a way to release tension. Sometimes, you know, there are groan laughs or wince laughs. There are laughs despite themselves. There are all different types of laughs. So there's, I mean, a good contrast, I think, in funny moments that happen during the play are when like when Jen has the line about, oh, that's the night we read Black Like Me on Lily's first visit. And that's, people laugh at that. And that's a grown laugh. And it feels funny because it's like, oh, no, we all know you shouldn't do that. But then later on, Lily is reading a section of Anna's book about how she has made her fictional mother a crack addict. And that always gets a laugh. Always. And it would be unfair of me to assume the audience just finds that funny because I'm a Black person and automatically relating that to crack. Like sometimes that's just a response people have. So I think we've spent so much time talking about building these moments so that they're real and have that care. We're getting out of the way of the audience, because if we work so much to make things funny or light, we're kind of trying to direct their experience, and that's not something we can do. That's not something we have control over, and that's not something they really have control over really in the moment as they're hearing these things.
Sometimes there's just those laughs where we recognize, oh, that person just said the stupidest thing, and I have done that too.
Or laughing sometimes because other people laugh. It's like, oh, I don't really know why that's funny, but I'm gonna laugh with you. Or sometimes things as simple as like, oh, the joke itself wasn't funny, but people's faces or the rhythm or just this, how the sounds hit the ear. There are so many reasons people laugh at things that they may or may not be conscious of. So I think as long as we're staying honest and, like Will was saying, have care for each other and care for the material, we're releasing the audience to have the experience that they need to have instead of dictating what we think their experience should be.
I was going to say, I think it's really interesting that Karen sets up really early in the play, in the moment between Will and Lily, that there is enough grace in this room, as Will was saying, but like that there's enough grace in this room between these people for slip ups and mistakes and awkward moments and foot in mouth moments to be forgiven, and that people are allowed to be fallible, as all of these characters very much are. And I think that's an interesting thing that she sets up for us, is like, we're gonna mess up in this room, and in this case, that's okay, which like again supports like what Cassia was saying about sometimes we don't really know why we're laughing, and then we go home thinking about it. So.
And the great thing for you folks is that every night the audience is different. So every night you have a new landscape of that stuff to negotiate, which is always the challenge in a comedy. 5 of you play a second character in a little short vignette. What's that like? How are those characters different from your real characters? And what is the particular challenge of playing 2 characters in this play? I'm sure you've all played more than one character in other plays, but what are the particular challenges in this play?
How quick the costume changes. That's
very
that's
quick.
Yeah.
And not carrying the pundit character's voice into the next scene. You have to, when there are like vocal changes and physical changes, it happens so fast that it's like,
particularly with your character, Emily,
Yeah.
your pundit is very powerful.
yeah. And I
can
had
see how
one
you'd have
line.
to fight against bringing her into the next scene.
Yeah, there's a joke at the top of the next scene that feels like a joke that the pundit would make. And for it's been a little bit of a hard shift sometimes to be like, no, let that voice go, let that person go, back to the other thing.
I think we were given permission early on, and it's really helpful to be as broad as we can with those pundit characters, because you just have that long to communicate to the audience exactly the archetype that this person fits into. So that was a great permission that we got early on, and really helps the challenge of introducing a completely new character in, like, sometimes in the middle of the play that will then, you'll see for 90 seconds and then they will go away forever. And then trying to make them, as in the case of my pundit, is trying to make it memorable enough that the audience will remember it when, you know, he is called back to at the very end of the play. So it's an interesting challenge to like make some sort of indelible stamp in the audience's brain in, you know, 90 seconds, and hopefully be able to help land a joke that happens like an hour and a half later.
Yeah, I'll say for me, my pundit, I go straight from that scene right into a fight with Anna, and so it is like, a very quick, adjustment, but I'll say being able to do that scene with Anna, it's wonderful because we only have just a couple seconds before we go on stage, but she's kind enough to fight with me backstage and say some terrible things to me just to get me in character.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. No, but also to answer your question, to further answer your question, we say, what is it like? As an actor, it's really fun. I mean, it's just really fun to be able to play an additional character. These particular characters. I mean, Karen is, she's so talented and has so many layers to this play. And one of those layers that you just really have to, acknowledge is the fact that it's fun. And some of those pundits are really fun, and they're fun to play. They're fun to watch. I crack up every day, being backstage and hearing, everyone else, go through their character arc.
As we do with you, Sam the Walmart Man.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's a
Oh,
collective
yeah.
favorite
we
moment for
do.
the rest of the cast.
Oh,
It's
we
a
do.
fun way to start the second act for sure.
I think it's just fun, and I can only speak for me. I don't feel a lot of pressure about worrying about separating the characters so much because Karen has done such a good job of making them clear, but also knowing that each of these pundits carry a seed of the character that they're doubled with. Like all of the, I think of Mrs. Simpson as Lily 50 years down the line. Like Lily is still like, she's younger and she's very much connected to herself in the world, and she follows her curiosity and she's having all these adventures. And that exuberance is only going to rise as she gets older. I think I'm not going to speak to any of the pundits, but when I listen to it and hear it, I hear very faint seeds of the character they're doubled with. So that kind of, for me, removes the pressure of having to separate them too much. Because one, Karen's already written them broad enough. The costumes do a lot. What we're doing does enough, but I don't feel the need to separate them because they're not meant to be completely divided off. The tracks were created for a reason. They were doubled that way for a reason. They speak to the scenes for a reason. So I just kind of don't really think about that. Although that's easy for me to say because like I literally skydive and Lily is just lounging on the couch for the entire show. So I'm like, oh, the work is done for me, but that's not something I think about, having to separate them.
It's also great too, because of the pundits, we get a better idea of what Lars Knudsen's film really is like, that it's not just, a stationary camera in this one room watching these people. We get an idea about like kind of more about the about his film and what the tone of the film is. And it helps us process, these 6 people on stage more fully.
Yeah, and like Anna said, the book club that we watch is just the centerpiece of it. He's studying the phenomenon of book clubs. We just happen to be the core of that project.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about us, and it never was. Like it's about what's happening around us, what we're a microcosm for, essentially.
Andrea, you only play one character, but your character has a huge character arc from extreme control freak, which I say with love because I can be that myself, and then a pretty big onstage freak out. How did you map that journey out for yourself across the play?
So it's all bottled up. It's more of a release, I think, than an arc. I think Anna, and we discussed this, Ben, our director, and Jenny, who was our wonderful choreographer of intimacy, brought to light that Anna and all of the other characters really don't do a lot of arcing or changing. they generally stay the same people, but they reveal themselves. And then because we have created this room and this community, they're able to do that somewhat safely, or at least knowing that they will be, or eventually they are accepted, for who they are. So I think a lot of it was actually taking what I knew I was going to do, taking that freak out and just like cinching it and bottling it up. And it creates the tension, I think, that is always there. And it's very uncomfortable and very rigid. And it's, I think, constantly on the verge of trying to escape. So that's kind of that's my challenge over the course of the play, is just how tightly can I keep her wrapped until that big explosion.
I love how you, as an actor, and I presume Ben as the director, have used Anna's relationship with alcohol throughout the play. That's something that the audience really tracks and really has a lot of fun with, I think.
Yeah.
The scene with the
I
box
was
wine is
intent
just
on
the
having
best.
that Franzia box. I was like that was something I did not want to let go of. And I think it's kind of really, and you see it also, I think, with the other characters too, how much they are willing to let loose and drink and kind of undo their ties a little bit, because it gets tense. It gets tense. And so, how do you kind of start loosening up? And then, all of that tension starts to seep out. So yeah, it is, I think the choice to have kind of our alcohol, the amount of alcohol we drink at Crow, was that was a decisive, that was, not by chance. It was so funny. I've had people who come to see the show and they're like, how are you not smashed by the end? And I'm like, it just takes a lot of practice. But no, none of it is real alcohol. So we keep joking as a cast that we want to do a wine through where we actually just
keep up with our characters.
We're just trying to keep up with our characters. One day we'll just go out for drinks and see if we could even do the lines. That'll be fun.
Oh, I want to be at that party. Okay.
You'd want to be there at the beginning. You probably wouldn't want to be there at the end, Richard.
Well, yeah, you're maybe right.
Messy.
I want to close with a question that is directly out of the play. What book had the deepest impact on you when you were young?
Harry Potter. It's cliche, but I discovered that series at just exactly the right time. Not like childhood, but like essentially at the age that Harry was when he was getting his letter. And it's not a hot take at all, but it opened my imagination up and made me a kid who comes from rural Arkansas feel like to quote my character from the play, there is a whole world out there waiting for you if you just go and look for it. And I felt that way, and it gave me that sense of magic and transportation into another place.
That's beautiful.
Mine is not a traditional book, but I think it's, if we're talking about what had the deepest impact on me, when I was a teenager, I went to Half Price Books with my family, and I happened to find this beat up poetry anthology. And I'm a huge lover of poetry, always have. That's actually where my first love of words comes from. And I still own it to this day. It is beat up, it is ripped, it is bound, but I've held on to it for so long because it's so full of so many things that I would return to it when I was sad. I would turn to it when I was happy. I would look to it to see how people 20, 60, 200 years ago felt how I was feeling. I used it to connect to other people. Like I say this unjokingly. If my apartment were on fire, the two things I would carry out with me are my wallet, if I can find it, and that book. That's I can't let it go, and I never will. I don't see myself ever getting rid of it because it still feels full. It feels like there are things, no matter how many times I've read it over the years, it feels like there's still things I haven't discovered, I don't understand yet, I don't know, I don't appreciate. So it's still very much alive for me.
It's so great when those things just happen into our lives when we need them.
I would say the first book I ever read on my own, cover to cover, was in kindergarten. I read Charlotte's Web, and it was the first time that like I was aware that books had the ability to move me and leave me with a feeling beyond just like being read a story and enjoying it. Like I was so immersed in these characters that like even now thinking about Charlotte, I get emotional, like I get, like what happened to her babies at the end. And I remember closing the book and just weeping. Like I was in school, like in a reading corner when I finished the book, and just bawled my eyes out and realized that it was a private experience. It was something that was happening just for me and shared with this book. And that's something that like I've carried with me from forward, is that books are deeply personal, and it's cool when you get to share them with somebody else later, but the actual experience of reading a book is fully personal.
I asked the same question of our playwright Karen Zacharias, and that was her answer, Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
Plug, if you haven't seen the pre-show chat with Karen, watch it. She's utterly delightful, and you shouldn't miss it. Who else?
I think Sherlock Holmes. I think that my dad had an anthology of Sherlock Holmes, and I think watching Sherlock Holmes's power of deduction made me curious about people in the way that turned me into an actor. Is like, this man walks with his arm near his side because he has something under his coat, like observing those little tiny details, I think was part of what turned me into a person who observes those for a living,
That's so cool.
For me, I'm going to cheat, and it's because there's so many there's so many books, but I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say a play, because it was in fact the most informative. Was I had to read Romeo and Juliet my 7th grade year, and I remember the teacher like asking what we thought, and we were raising our, and people were saying, boring, like like kind of just these like, it's a sleeper, it's like all of these negative things. And then I said I didn't understand it. And so she asked what I didn't understand about it. And I said, I literally just don't understand what they're saying. And so she had me read this might have helped, my 7th grade crush, who happened to be in that English room, had me read the balcony scene out loud in front of the class. And I was like, I think that's what moved me to like become an actor. It was all because of Scott Turner in the 7th grade. But
Scott Turner, you hear that?
Yeah, if you're watching, I'm still waiting for you. No, I'm kidding. But I was very moved, and I all of a sudden understood it, and I realized saying words aloud for me was actually a way for me to actually involve myself and engage better with the book. I needed to actually speak the words aloud, and I guess as far as a learner, that's something that's necessary for me to comprehend, and so that really changed my life.
That's great. Sean, we have 30 seconds left before the Zoom gods turn us off. Go.
Well, I will give you 3 minutes then. No, I would say it would be The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It was a book that my mom read aloud to me and my siblings when we were young, and I was immediately taken with it. And it was because it felt
true. I mean, C.S. Lewis even says that there are true myths, and that there's a deeper meaning behind the stories that we tell. And coincidentally, it was also the first play I ever saw.
Well, the ministers of Zoom are indeed strict, and they stopped our recording at the appointed time. But I want to thank all the actors for joining us, and I want to thank you for watching us. And I'm glad you saw the book club play, and I look forward to you our next time around. Thanks. Bye, everybody.